Good. I'm gonna double check we are in fact live. Looks like yes. Okay. So it's been about 2 weeks since the last Fireside chat, or rather 3 weeks, I think. Let's see. Yeah, 3 weeks. So missed a couple. But we are back. Nothing too crazy going on. I think the big one is we got a couple events coming up. Officer meeting is this Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Pacific, usual time in the command center voice chat. Um, I mean, as usual, COs are required to attend. NCOs are welcome to attend. I would encourage um, more attendance among NCOs this time for those interested because um, I'll get into this a bit later, but there's some relatively small organizational changes we've been discussing for a month or two that I'd like to try to hammer out some more details for sure on. So we will probably do that at the officer meeting or attempt to and see what kind of progress is made in that vein. Um, Other than that, we have a League of Legends tournament coming up. Another one, Vandal City 2v2. We've been doing 1v1 tournaments. This is going to be the first 2v2 in quite a long time. That is this Sunday, December 3rd at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Still fixing up the events and such for that. I think I just updated the calendar for that, right? Oh, no, it looks like that didn't go through. Well, let me do that while I'm thinking about it. If I don't continually click the wrong folder over again. There we go. Yep, this Sunday, December 3rd, 5 p.m. Pacific. So do sign up for that. Battlefy link is in the League of Legends channel. Also, just our Battlefy page. And as usual, we will be bringing out the... we kind of have our own League of Legends tournament category and associated channels. We'll bring those out usually the day before with just some more details and for last-minute signups and preparation and such. Okay, other than that, let's see if we got anything else. Well, okay, let me talk just a little bit. Oh, yeah, month ending. So we're going to have Yule coming up in December. That's super fun. And also, of course, as usual with the month ending, going to be a new roll call coming out tomorrow. Sit reps are going to be due tomorrow. If you haven't posted a roll call, you've got a couple of hours. I mean, realistically, you've got until the officer meeting because that's when we kind of finalize things. But technically speaking, yes, you need to post before the end of the current month. But kind of in the vein of kind of the current system, where right now Ulfal, generally speaking, is doing all of the roster review for the whole clan himself, and the roster is divided up by houses on the roster page. And then we kind of discuss at the officer meeting. I think, frankly, it's not a great system. I think it could be improved. I think the changes we've been talking about are really based around moving a bit more power and presence into platoons and platoon leadership, broadly speaking. So specifically speaking, the idea would be that platoon leaders will be doing the roster review for the people that are in their platoon or that are on their game, so to speak, including reviewing them by the end of the month. And platoon leaders would also have the ability to just promote and demote people. So that wouldn't be restricted to COs. It would, in fact, be any platoon leader is able to do that, and any CO is able to do that. So you could, in theory, have a platoon leader who is a Marine allowed to promote and demote people. The catch would probably be, And these ideas are still very much under construction. We've been discussing various things, and I want to discuss that more at the officer meeting too. But probably what we would do is that the same way it kind of works currently, you can't promote people past your own rank. So we would probably do that. To me, I can't really imagine a scenario where, say, a Marine is leading a rough platoon, which would be surprising enough, but possible. But if that were the case, but they are promoting somebody past their rank of Marine without having made it past Marine themselves, it seems like an odd scenario to have. I suppose discussing some of those very specific, vaguely possible eventualities is something that we will be doing on Saturday as well, and further on in the Command Center text chat. Do read up on that. If you're in that chat, all platoon leaders are in there, all NCOs, all officers, period, are in there, and platoon leaderships. We've been talking about those changes quite a lot. And as much as it's not like a massive overhaul of anything, it is one of the more significant things we've done in quite a while. In practice, for the average member, it's probably not going to really change much as far as their routine. I think the one change that we've talked about is potentially having people have to post their platoon in roll call. And for many people, the response is going to be, what is a platoon? Because platoons have been sort of not shelved, but very much kind of hidden behind a curtain, basically. They kind of only exist in the sense of there is a person or persons in charge of WA's affairs on a given game. So the idea is that we make those more present for people. We discussed potentially having platoon individual roll calls, but it would break some of the stuff because the roll call link is linked in a lot of places and mentioned in a lot of places, and changing its name and having a bunch of different links would require a lot of different updates, add a lot of different channels for people that are in all of those. So I think ultimately we'll probably try to keep the global roll call for the sake of continuity. Again, none of this stuff is set in stone, but I think personally that's where I'm leaning right now. And then simply have people actually have to list their platoon in their roll call. And essentially what we'd probably be trying to do is sort people into platoons based on what games they play, while potentially having a sort of catch-all miscellaneous platoon for people that don't play one of our main games, and kind of go from there with some wiggle room. People would be free to transfer between platoons, and the idea would be we might put people in platoons who just hang out with the people in those platoons a lot. But the significance of which platoon you're in would be less so because we would not be bringing back platoon chats. We discussed that the way we had the warband channels, exclusive warband channels many years ago. Some people will remember. We discussed bringing those back potentially, but I think ultimately it doesn't really... It has some negative effects. I think if you compare and contrast it with, say, going back to the Third Fleet, or just anytime WA was using the forums, yes, each division and platoon has its own forum where they would usually communicate, but that was always global to everyone. And it's, again, I've said it before, but it's tough to make those comparisons because you're talking about a time when StarCraft was still the headquarters by far, and it was never even close. Yeah, okay, you made your platoon on Tribal Wars and you recruited 20 people, but none of them signed up for the forums. None of them even have any vague notion of what WA actually is. So realistically, that platoon is like just you or one other guy or something like that. Versus StarCraft was always at headquarters. So it's, as much as I think we can learn from history, I think we also have to keep that in mind that it was also a different time too. As much as it was easier to just have one game to base everything off of, that's just not where we are right now. Right now we have several games that are big, none of them dominating the others, and so that's kind of what we're looking at is, okay, those are our platoons and divisions. In practice, in the past, StarCraft was its own division with many StarCraft platoons within it. That's still an option, but it doesn't feel to me like, I don't think it has to any of the other Admiralty or anybody running any platoons, that any platoons are overflowing to the point that we need to have multiple platoons on the same game. I don't think that we've hit that point with any games right now. Hopefully, it'd be a good problem to have, but we'll see. But hopefully, that kind of gives a broad idea of what we're talking about. Essentially, just asking platoon leaders to shoulder on more responsibility, but only for their platoons. And the roster, instead of being organized by houses, it would be organized by platoons. And then the people who are more hands-on interacting with the people on a given game are the ones in charge of promoting and demoting and reviewing those people, which really makes a lot more sense. And it makes it a lot easier because the burden, the work is split up between a lot of different people. It gives platoon leaders something to do, both in terms of just in general, but also kind of a way to prove themselves. Like, oh, okay, if you can consistently get your sit rep in and promote and demote people, and kind of do your job in that way, that makes it easier for us to promote you because we're like, okay, well, this person is doing everything right, and they've proven it, they've shown it. Another thing we discussed along with that was having like a platoon leadership certification, which would basically just be us making sure that you know how to post a sit rep and how to do roster review. Not so much like, do you know how to lead a platoon, like how to build a platoon from scratch or something like that. That's kind of up to you, and it might vary from game to game. So it's not really a case of like, we're trying to guarantee that your platoon will be successful. It's more like we're trying to guarantee that if we're putting you in charge of platoon, you know how to do the administrative side of it. And we've shown you how to do it, and you're able to do that on your own. That's really all it is. So, yeah, that's kind of most of the things we've been talking about. Again, I don't feel like any of it is massive changes, but I do think it's better than the way we're doing it currently. I think the downside, it's definitely not perfect. The downside being sorting people into platoons is just always going to be a challenge. The fact that it doesn't have a ton of meaning for you, the main meaning it will have is just instead of Ulfald broadly promoting and demoting everybody, based on his review, now instead some other person will be in charge of reviewing people who play their game, and you, for example, and promoting and demoting you. Okay, it's been her. Hey, does a platoon mean like a team which plays in tournaments for a particular game? Not exactly, no. So, platoons exist currently. Basically, just every like the biggest games, that WA plays, like the games that have the most active players on them, have what we call a platoon, which is the idea is everyone who plays that game is in the platoon. But what it really means is we just have one, maybe two people who are in charge of, say, they're in charge of things on League of Legends for Clan WA. Or we have a StarCraft platoon. We have one or two people in charge of the StarCraft platoon. They're in charge of WA stuff on StarCraft. So that basically means each month they write a report on who is active playing that game, and ideally they run events for it too. Like they host like a StarCraft night or a League of Legends night, or even tournaments and stuff like Fold Mather has been doing. That's kind of how it works right now. But yeah, the platoons, they're like really, really behind the scenes right now. So what we're talking about is trying to make them more visible, kind of, or just basically, like I was saying, instead of Ulfald broadly reviewing everybody, then say we have somebody who's running things on League of Legends reviewing all the League of Legends people, which makes more sense because whoever's running League of Legends is going to know those people better, and have a better idea of how to promote and demote them. I mean, I think Ulfald's been doing a fantastic job. I'm not trying to badmouth him at all, but I think it's not fair to him that he has to do the entire clan's review all himself, and that's just our system. But so basically, we're trying to change things so that work is split up among people, and it's also assigned to people who are interacting with people more regularly, and they can have a little better idea of what's going on, and also potentially people that could use something to do. Because I've kind of talked about it before. A lot of times, if we talk to people and say, hey, would you mind doing this thing, or helping out the clan in this way? almost every single time they're like, oh yeah, for sure. Like, I think a lot of people are more than willing to help or to do some little work or something. It's not like any of this stuff is like a ton of work. It's just little things. But they just don't know how to do it, or they don't know that it needs to be done, that kind of thing. So I think that having things less just like top focused the way they are now, where it's kind of like myself and to a lesser degree the Admiralty are doing everything. It's definitely easier on us, and I think just better for everybody if we move some of that stuff further down the chain of command. And yeah, kind of rambling a fair bit, but that hopefully gives some idea of some of the changes that we're talking about. Again, for the average member, the only potential change would probably be having to list your platoon in your roll call. And you might have somebody reminding you to post in roll call if you forget, or maybe talking to you about getting promoted or something like that, which is something that we've wanted to have done for a long time, but it's been really inconsistent. It's kind of moved around. For a while, we were trying to get the Commodore to do it, and now we don't have a Commodore right now. So I think that it probably makes the most sense to just... And it reminded me, too, of something we were doing before, which is, for a while, like, say, Asilva was doing the House Commander, the review for all the House Commander people. So Asilva would ping the people in House Commander who had missed roll call with a few days left and say, hey, post a roll call. Or somebody might do that for House Warden or House Dane or whatever. So that makes sense, but it's kind of weird because it's like implying that the lord or lady of a house is the one in charge of roll call, which is not really how it's supposed to be, because there's not necessarily any connection between being lord or lady of a house and being an officer or a moderator on the server. Being lord or lady of a house has responsibilities, but they're more like ceremonial for the most part. So having that connection kind of unintentionally happened. So I think it makes more sense if we say, okay, the person in charge of the League of Legends platoon, it's their job to ping the League of Legends people and who have missed roll call and remind them to post a roll call. And the same thing for the StarCraft platoon leadership for the StarCraft platoon. And so on. So that's the idea. And yeah, we're going to have situations where somebody plays 5 different games, or somebody only plays, like, I don't know, some highly specific platoon. Or some highly specific game that nobody else plays. What if you're in more than one platoon? Yeah, so that's one of the key issues that we still need to discuss. I think the plan is that we probably won't have or won't allow people to be in more than one platoon. So probably we will just put people into a platoon that makes the most sense. Because, it's not like... Years ago, it was like, if you're in a war band, which is the same thing as a platoon, it's just what we used to call them, then you're stuck in that war band's chat channel, which is only the people in your war band are in there, and you're in there, you're kind of in the cool kids club now, and that's where you are. So switching to a different one was quite a big deal. Kind of. I mean, to somebody who might have friends there or something. But now everything is open. I mean, each platoon, they're going to be doing stuff in the game channels that everybody can already see. They're public to everybody. Yeah, we have the players role for League of Legends players or Valheim players or Valorant players or whatever, but it's all public. So switching between which platoon you're in doesn't make a huge difference. We're basically just trying to get you in a platoon that makes the most sense in terms of the person who's running it ideally actually knows you, if possible, or talks to you or interacts with you. Exactly, yeah, an organizational thing, yeah. We're just trying to get it so that, like, the person in charge of evaluating people for promoting them is somebody that knows you more, hopefully, so that they kind of have a better idea of what's going on. And if we, so like, as a recruit, are we already in a platoon based on the game we joined in, or do we have to apply for it somewhere? Yeah, so right now, platoons don't really... This is all changes that we're talking about making that haven't happened yet. So if we do this, whenever we do this, and it would probably not be for at least a month, possibly more, that this would happen, we will put everyone into a platoon. Probably what we'll do is kind of... We'll go through all the moderators and leadership and just kind of sort everyone into platoons initially. And then we'll talk to everyone individually and say, hey, we put you in this platoon. Does that seem okay? Because again, it's... I mean... you can totally transfer to any platoon you want. But we also aren't going to have platoons for every single game in existence. If you look under the game category, we have like 30 games or something in there. We're not going to have 30 platoons. We're going to probably keep like what we have now, which I don't even know is like 8 or something. So people can make their own platoons, which would be called kind of rough platoons, sort of like a starter platoon. And that's totally going to be an option for anybody to do, so you can make your own. But if you only play a game that doesn't have a platoon, then you'll probably be in this sort of miscellaneous platoon. That's just like not a specific game. It's just like the people who didn't fit into a different platoon, basically. So that's probably what we'll do. Yeah. So, I mean, you'll be able to switch anytime, but we will talk to you and everybody individually whenever we actually do this. I mean, again, this is all kind of in the planning stages. It's been in the planning stages for a couple months, but don't want to roll it out. Because, yeah, there are some tricky stuff like, okay, I play 3 different games that all have platoons. Which one am I in? Yeah, that's kind of a tricky one. I mean, we'd probably just put you into the platoon that the game you play the most or close to the most as much as we can, because it's basically just figuring out, okay, who's gonna be the person that is like reminding you to post a roll call and maybe talking to you about, hey, do you want to get promoted? That kind of thing. So, I mean, it wouldn't have a huge effect. It will have the most effect for people that move up the ranks a fair bit, because let's say you're like, hey, I play League of Legends a lot. I wouldn't mind hosting my own League of Legends event, or helping with the current one, or maybe helping with writing the monthly report on the League of Legends platoon. If you want to do any of that stuff, logically, you would be in the League of Legends platoon. Again, it would not necessarily be required. For example, we have currently, what is a good example? I want to say a Silva is. Yeah, okay. So a Silva is in charge of 2 different platoons, League of Legends and Destiny 2. But she's actually not hosting the event nights for either of those. Foldmather hosts League of Legends night, and Yarnraffen hosts Destiny 2 night. So technically, she is running 2 different platoons, which is an option. But that's another complicated thing where I think the idea is that if you're leading a platoon, you'll be part of like this broader group called just command or something like that. Rather than, so instead of being officially part of the platoon, you'll be part of like the command group, the leadership group, basically. Again, that's kind of what we're looking at right now. Some of this stuff is, I'm sure it's confusing. It's confusing to me a little bit. It's complicated. We're trying to simplify it as much as possible and figure out a way to do it, while hopefully not confusing the average member as much as we possibly can, and also making the positive changes that we want to happen, mainly being just having platoons be more of a thing, to put it simply. And to kind of empower platoon leaders, both current ones, but also, you know, trying to let people know that, hey, if you want to start things on a game, and start your own rough platoon, you can 100% do that. And you don't have to be a certain rank. The only rank restriction we're thinking is that you've heard me say rough platoon and platoon. So rough platoons are like smaller or starter platoons, whereas platoons are sort of full-fledged humming machines that are basically, there's going to be some requirements for a platoon, such as having a certain number of people actively playing the game, and there should be events being hosted for the game regularly too. And that's already a requirement. But probably what we'll do is that if you are part of a rough platoon, you will not be able to get promoted past the rank of Master Chief Petty Officer, which is still fairly high. And then to make it to warrant officer or higher, you would have to be part of a platoon. So either help your current rough platoon become a platoon, or transfer to a platoon, a full-on platoon, and help out with that. But again, that's kind of something where it's like, I don't want to encourage people to just like abandon their rough platoon because they're mad that they can't get promoted higher than MCPO. That's not great. So as you can see, there are many issues to discuss, but a lot of this reorganization is due to the WA clan. It used to be really large, and now it's only a handful of main members playing a smaller subset of the games. I don't know if I'd say exactly. I feel it's more just being more spread out because, you know, the number of warbands we had years ago was like basically the same as the number of platoons we have right now. I mean, where we are right now with our roster is a bit bigger than we were in 2018. And we've been pretty much at that number for a while. Keeping in mind, of course, that we used to not have necessarily all these activity requirements. Like, what we have now is that if you go inactive, you're just a reservist. So you're still kind of part of WA, but you don't have to post a roll call, basically. So you can kind of hang out as much as you want, but you're not going to rank up, and you can't take part in a couple of, you know, clan-specific festivals and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely, I would say there is a membership issue for sure in terms of leadership right now. Or I don't know if membership issue is quite the right word, but what I would say is that I think most of the higher ups are overworked. Kind of like I said, like we're kind of too top heavy right now. Not necessarily numerically, but in terms of work. Because basically the way the clan works right now is I've set it up, or we've set it up such that I have to do a ton of stuff, and the Admiralty has to do a ton of stuff, and a lot of leadership is running multiple platoons or running a division and a platoon and such. Ideally, we would have people at each level. So we're kind of missing a fair number of people kind of in the middle there. We kind of have the NCO shortage. We've talked about at previous officer meetings. So that's kind of a big thing. And that's part of the reason we've talked about these changes, is that wanting to kind of empower people at those middle ranks to say, hey, you can just go and start your own platoon. I mean, you're welcome to do it, rather than kind of how it is now, where there's just that disconnect because the middle is kind of missing. So it's a lot of people at Gunner and Marine and Master Gunner just sitting around saying, okay, when will the magical promotion fairy appear and give me a promotion at some point? And there's kind of that disconnect. So our hope is that if we kind of empower platoons, it will become more like, okay, this person's leading things on League of Legends, and they have their group of people that play, and they interact regularly, and they host events, and that League of Legends platoon leader is the one in charge of promoting them and talking to them and keeping track of them, which makes a lot more sense. I mean, it's basically how we used to do it about 15 years ago, or even, I mean, more recently, like 12 years ago-ish still. Yeah. So I would say it's a big thing is kind of an NCO shortage, and I mean, we've been grappling since the fall of StarCraft 1. We've honestly been trying different things, sort of, just trying to figure out the best way to do things now that we're organized in Discord and not the forums, and StarCraft exists, but it's more StarCraft 2, and it's more a lot of other games as well. Because, yeah, I mean, in practice, WA was never like, I mean, yeah, we're a multi-game clan, but in the past, it was always more like we had StarCraft and then maybe a handful of other platoons and divisions. So now it's more like we have a handful of big platoons and a couple of small ones, and that's about it. We don't have a main one, so I think that's part of it, but also I completely lost my train of thought on it. Yeah, I can't recall, but I think that's some of the differences too. Is, I mean, we're trying to figure out, like, because I think the way platoons worked 15 years ago was great, but we haven't figured out a really great way to do it. I mean, the way warbands worked pretty well, but warbands didn't necessarily play a specific game. That's not how they were envisioned. They actually started off as just groups for fun, and then I sort of pushed them to pick a game, and a lot of them couldn't do it because they all played like 4 games. So you can see that issue of, yeah, all these different games is just a problem. So the way WA works now, where we have game channels for like 30 games, I would say is much more spread out for sure than we'd ever been. because it used to be the forums, and we sure did not have 40 different sub-forums for every single game. It's more like we had like 6 games at most, and most of them were tiny. And then there was StarCraft. Anyway, sorry. I know it will take a lot of time, but if I try to make a team for Wild Rift and participate in tourneys, do we represent WA, or do we get to name a team as a rough platoon? It's a good question. I mean, it doesn't have to take that much time. You can start a rough platoon right now. Basically, you'd want to talk to Kusiag because, I mean, you can talk to me, but I will probably just refer to you to Kusiag because he is sort of at the top in terms of all of our games, basically. So we have all of our platoons on different games. Kusiag is at the very top of that. So he is in charge of making new rough platoons and platoons, moving platoons around, commissioning and decommissioning platoons, all that kind of stuff. So he's kind of the guy to talk to saying, hey, I want to start a rough platoon. But generally our attitude is, yeah, go for it. I mean, you totally can. Right now, the only thing you'll have to do if you do that is each month we ask you to write a report. So you should be able to see the situation reports channel under WAHQ. That's the report. There's a pinned format. It's not really complicated. The main purpose is to give us some idea of what's going on the game that you're doing and who all is playing it with you, which is important, A, so we know who is active in general, but also so we know how you're doing as far as, are you getting a bunch of people playing the game or not so much interest, that kind of thing. So that's really all you have to do. But yeah, you can talk to Kusiag and start that. As far as representing WA or name your team as a rough platoon, probably up to you. I'd say you could do either one. I know that's been a thing too, where like if we make like a guild or a clan in some game, it's kind of like, okay, do we name it Warriors of Icir or do we name it, Un's Favored or Teutonic Order, like the name of some of our platoons? And my attitude has always been whichever one you want, really. A lot of times we have to worry about like which names are already taken in the game. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's either one, really. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to go around for office hours. Thank you guys for participating in the chat. That's super cool. We don't often get a lot of questions in chat, so I really appreciate that. And this goes on YouTube too, so then people can, watch the VOD and maybe learn something. Maybe not. I don't know. But yeah, I'll be around for office hours. Insert holler shortly.